Alex O'Connor is one of the most popular online philosophical influencers, and he's probably best known for his clever and challenging arguments against religion and belief in God. While I'm not an atheist, I actually really like Alex, and many of his arguments are very convincing. However, sometimes his reasoning can be flawed, as you'll see in this video. Today, I'm going to respond to his video, "This is why I don't believe in God," explain where I disagree, and show you why I don't think his conclusions tell the whole story. So let's start by seeing how he frames his core argument.
I want to make my own case that upon an honest analysis of the world we find ourselves in, it should compel us to dismiss the hypothesis of a supernatural creator.
So here we can see Alex's central claim is that if we are to honestly look at the evidence, we should be compelled to actively dismiss the God hypothesis. It's important to acknowledge that he isn't simply saying the evidence for God is insufficient for him. He's claiming the evidence against God is so strong that we should be able to dismiss God completely. While this is a view many people hold, I think it's a very flawed position. In my honest opinion, none of the arguments Alex presents in his video even come close to rendering God something that can simply be dismissed, as I'll explain shortly. So, what actually are the arguments Alex is going to present to support his claim? Let's see.
I'm going to be making the claim specifically that atheism or naturalism provides a better account for three facts of our universe. The first being the hiddenness of God. The second being the geographical, statistical arrangement, shall we say, of religious belief. And the third will be the problem of gratuitous suffering.
Now, these are undeniably important issues, and while I can fully understand them making someone feel slightly less inclined to believe in God, I think they quickly fall apart when challenged. And I hope to show you how these three arguments fall far short of making God an idea that can be disregarded. So, let's take a look at his first argument, the problem of divine hiddenness.
If there is a God, then simply, why is he hidden from so many of us so much of the time? If theism is to offer a sufficient account of reality, then it must offer an account of what J.L. Schellenberg has famously labelled non-resistant non-belief. People who disbelieve in God, not out of resistance or stubbornness or a hardened heart, but rather due to sheer lack of conviction. Indeed, many such people actively want to be convinced of God's existence, but no matter how hard they search, they simply find no answer forthcoming from the heavens.
Here Alex presents the argument that an all-loving God wouldn't allow for non-resistant non-belief, since it logically seems like an all-loving God would want us all to know him, since he wants the best for us. And while of course this is a valid criticism, and it may seem like a strong argument against God at first, I think it quickly falls apart under scrutiny. Why? Because there are so many conceivable reasons that a God could make himself hidden or keep a distance from us. For example, it seems a loving God would want us to have free will. And for us to have genuine free will, it would be necessary for him to keep a distance from us. I mean, think about it. If God's existence was completely unmistakable, do you think we would have the freedom to make moral decisions? To choose between right and wrong? To me, it seems clear that if God's existence was an obvious fact, we would be forced to do the right thing at all times. Not because we genuinely wish to do so, but because we have to. This theoretical world where God reveals himself to everyone seems like a scenario where moral freedom, the ability to authentically make moral decisions, is impossible. Think of it this way. When someone is driving on a road, they have the freedom to stay under the speed limit, so they don't endanger those around them. Or do the wrong thing and break the speed limit so they can reach their destination faster, putting their self-interest above the safety of others. However, if that same road had a line of police cars parked alongside it, the driver who would have otherwise chosen to break the speed limit will instead be forced to abide by the speed limit, not because they truly want to, but because they have to. This is much the same as if God's existence was made obvious to all of us. Our morality would become forced, and we would be coerced into doing the right thing at all times. And this is just one of many plausible explanations for divine hiddenness occurring. And to me, it isn't just plausible that God would keep a distance from us, but actually expected.
I have, to put it mildly, been looking for God. Just recently, I agreed to embark on a series of study of the wisdom literature, specifically reading it again in the hopes that this time I might finally feel a divine presence seeping from between the lines. I've looked in poetry, I've looked in the Psalms, I've looked in Job, I've looked in Ecclesiastes, I've looked in Dostoevsky, I read C.S. Lewis, I listened to worship music, I prayed, I studied the gospel, I even got an actual degree in theology from a university, and nothing, not once, Not nearly, not ever, not even briefly have I experienced anything that speaks to the existence of a God. For my efforts, I have been awarded radio silence.
Here, Alex seems to be saying that in order for him to believe in God, he feels he must have some kind of experience or encounter with him. To me, it seems Alex is setting an incredibly unrealistic standard for belief here. While some of the things we believe are based on direct evidence, like how I believe I'm talking to a camera right now because I can see it, we also hold many beliefs based on indirect evidence and inference to the best explanation. For example, take the Big Bang, the theory for the beginning of the universe. Nobody has ever seen a Big Bang, but I still believe the Big Bang occurred because the evidence for it leads me to believe it is most likely to be true. If someone said, I know there's lots of evidence that supports the Big Bang theory, but I've never personally seen one, and I simply can't bring myself to believe the Big Bang occurred until I see it for myself. That would sound insane, and honestly about as convincing as the argument Alex is putting forward here. I mean, I've never met Cleopatra, but I still believe she existed because I trust the historical evidence that she did. And the same standard for belief should apply with God. Sometimes you just have to trust indirect forms of evidence and use inference to the best explanation.
Such belief is unequally present across the globe. How likely you are to be a theist, in other words, is intimately tied to the place in which you happen to be born. What can better explain this geographical spread? Theism or naturalism or atheism? Is it not troubling, Jonathan, as a Christian, that your place of birth is a reliable statistical indicator of how likely you are to be saved?
Here, Alex seems to be using the fact that a belief in God is unevenly distributed across the world as evidence against the existence of God. But in reality, this is an argument against religion, not against the idea that the universe has a creator. But even from the religious perspective, I don't think Alex's argument holds much weight. Firstly, if God is to allow us to have free will, it seems expected that there would be a diversity of beliefs across the world. And additionally, let's say someone was born into the wrong religion. It seems an all-knowing God would still be able to fairly judge their moral character, and the God would most likely know how that person would have acted had they been born in a different part of the world. And if you accept these things, it seems that the global diversity of religious opinion would have no bearing on the actual truth of any one religion. I mean, the acceptance of evolution varies dramatically across the world as well, with only 40% of the world's population actually believing in evolution. But the fact many people reject it and it varies from each part of the world doesn't make it a false idea.
Gratuitous suffering. Gratuitous here means something like unjustified or unwarranted or meaningless. The existence of meaningless or unnecessary suffering does seem to be incompatible with the existence of a God who loves us and has the power to prevent it from happening. The biggest problem for theism here is not, famously, the great, intense sufferings of the world, like holocausts or earthquakes, but rather menial, less significant suffering, like being caught out in the rain or stubbing your toe. What could possibly be served? What possible end could be served? What possible meaning could there be in stubbing your toe? They seem, that is to say, meaningless and unnecessary.
Here, Alex is raising the problem of meaningless suffering. He seems to have accepted that God would plausibly allow certain forms of suffering, as long as they can create meaningful experiences, such as allowing for the development of moral character or creating greater goods like compassion, bravery, and so on. So the issue he raises specifically is the fact that sometimes people experience suffering that seems purposeless without any kind of greater meaning, like stubbing your toe, as he said. And I agree. If the only reason God would allow suffering was to create greater meaning in the world, then gratuitous evil would be a huge problem for theism. However, unfortunately for Alex, this is not the only reason God would allow suffering to occur. In fact, pointless suffering is most likely necessary for us to have free will. Why? Think of it this way. For us to have free will, we need to be able to make rational decisions. And to do that, we must be able to predict what the outcomes of our actions will be. And it seems that in order for us to do this, we must exist within a system that functions predictably by following rigid, natural laws. For example, the laws of physics are essential for me to know that letting go of my phone will cause it to fall to the ground. And if these rigid, natural laws were constantly changing, we wouldn't be able to make informed decisions or know what the outcomes of our actions will be. In other words, rigid, natural laws seem to be necessary to facilitate free will and rational agency. And if we have free will, and we exist in a system that follows innate natural laws, it is unavoidable that seemingly meaningless suffering will occur. What I mean to say is, free will unfortunately includes the freedom to stub your toe, however painful it may be. It's a cruel world out there, I know. And another point to consider is that as human beings, we are severely cognitively limited compared to an all-knowing God. And therefore, are we even capable of determining whether a particular instance of suffering is meaningful or not? Imagine you're a chimpanzee that was used in the testing of the polio vaccine. You would certainly view the fact you got injected with a painful needle to be meaningless suffering. But the truth is, that seemingly purposeless suffering inflicted on the chimpanzee went on to save countless lives. However, the chimpanzee could never understand this, as it lacks the cognitive ability to do so. And in the same way this chimpanzee is cognitively limited compared to us, we are cognitively limited compared to God. So who are we to decide whether any instance of suffering is meaningful or not? Perhaps Alex and the chimpanzee have something in common.
Whatever theodicy might explain human suffering, the existence of animal suffering seems infinitely more difficult to explain. Animals are not free in the way that we are, and so are immune to the free will defense.
Okay, so while animals certainly aren't free in the same way as humans, that doesn't necessarily mean animals don't have any kind of free will. To say animals are immune to the free will defense is debatable.
They cannot morally develop in the way that we can, and so are immune to soul-making theodicies. They are, on most accounts, not going to heaven, and so they will not be compensated for their suffering.
Ignoring the fact this is an argument against religion, not God, I would definitely challenge this. Many religious traditions believe in an afterlife for non-human animals, including many Christian interpretations of the Bible. While in Christianity it is a topic of debate, it's a real possibility.
Yet their suffering is immeasurably large. Imagine a deer with its leg caught under a fallen tree, dying of starved confusion. What could possibly be the purpose or meaning of this? I'll remind you that this is exactly the kind of thing that we should expect to see if the natural world is an amoral arena of accidentally existing organisms fighting with each other to stay alive. But can we really expect this on theism? Should we expect this on theism?
In my opinion, yes, it would be expected. For the same reasons I explained earlier. In order for us to have free will, we must exist in a system governed by innate natural laws. In a system such as this, it seems necessary that meaningless suffering will occur, whether the victim of this suffering is a human being or an animal. If gravity just stopped functioning every time a tree was about to fall on top of an animal, we would no longer exist in a natural system where God's existence was a plausible possibility. We would be existing in a world of perpetual miracles, and God's existence would be an obvious fact. And for reasons I explored earlier, I don't think genuine human free will would be possible in this scenario.
Thus, atheism offers a better account, in my view, than theism of three crucial and unavoidable facts: divine hiddenness, geographical religious statistics, and the existence of gratuitous human and non-human suffering.
Alex says that atheism provides a better account of these three things, but I simply disagree. To me, it seems that these three issues do not contradict atheism or theism. In other words, they are fully compatible with both worldviews, for reasons I've outlined today, and for others I didn't have the time to go into. When you step back, I don't think any of Alex's three arguments actually compel us to dismiss God. Hiddenness, geographic patterns of belief, and meaningless suffering are all real questions, but questions are not disproofs. In my opinion, Alex has not shown that the idea of God is something we can confidently throw out. If you enjoyed the video, please do leave a like and subscribe. I would really appreciate it. And until the next one, bye bye.